if you think you lost so much over there, go back in there and get it. She said, you only lose something if you refuse to pick it up again. You know, when you know it's there and if you refuse to pick it up again. So she was telling us that we needed to take this back. You know, that we couldn't just continue to be victims of this place. We needed to take it back.
For 26 years, Sophie Pierre was the chief of her band on the British Columbia Reserve of St. Mary's. She is now the chief commissioner for the BC Treaty Commission, but she's respected and admired in Native communities across Canada for having turned the former residential school, in which she spent 9 years of her childhood, into a world-class resort, casino, and golf course. We met up with Sophie Pierre in Cranbrook.
Sophie, do you remember, I know you've written about this, so I'm actually asking you a question that I know the answer to already, because I know you do remember the day when you were young that your mother brought you to what I guess was then called the Kootenays Indian Residential School, right? Yes, yes. It was in the mid-50s, is that right?
That's right, 1956.
Do you remember walking up that drive?
I remember that day. I remember the feelings of anxiety and scared.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 6.
6.
Yep. Yes.
And you remember coming up that drive?
I remember that drive, that walking up that driveway. Well, I think what I was more excited about and everything was because I had new shoes and I had a new dress. Little Mary Jane's, and I was pretty proud of myself, thinking I was looking pretty good. And then realizing, well, the reason for all this finery was that I was being brought to the school here.
Yeah. There was a nun standing on the stairs?
Oh, yes, right? Yeah. Because there were a lot of kids arriving throughout the day. And so there was a nun standing up at the top of the stairs, and she was, welcoming all the children that were arriving. And, so I remember that day.
Yeah, I bet. What was it like once you got in? I mean, I can remember going to school for the first time, just a regular school, not being taken away from my parents, not being able to, I got to go home at the end of the day and stuff like that. But I remember still to this day those feelings of anxiety and so on. Yeah. But you got put in there for 10 months out of the year and weren't allowed to leave.
That's right. Yeah.
What did that feel like? Do you remember what it felt like?
It was a really difficult place to grow up. It was a very, very lonesome place to grow up for a child. And you just never felt like every child needs to have a champion on their side to make them, to help them to grow. And, well, of course, none of us did. We were just a whole bunch of kids thrown together.
Yeah.
And, so it was pretty hard.
So you're taking classes during the day? They're teaching you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we took classes.
You getting a lot of religious training?
We had a lot of religious training. I remember spending lots of time on my knees and praying either in the chapel or in the classroom. Like we prayed every day in the classroom. So
I know that you've talked about being able to look out the dormitory window that you were in and being able to see where you lived.
Oh, yes.
And not being able to go home.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That must have been awful.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. We had kids there from the Okanagan that never got to see their parents. They never got to go home. And, so they had that experience, and then there was my experience, and those of us who live around here, that, like, I could see my home. Other kids, they could see their parents driving by, or walking by to go into town, and I remember seeing children run to the fence line if they saw their parents walking by, and, just trying to talk to them, and then, but not being able to go home with them.
So, it sounds, when you talk about kids trying to talk to their parents who are walking by, it's almost like it sounds like a prisoner of war camp is what it sounds like. What was the treatment like in it?
Well, it was like I said, other than the real, the emotional and the mental strain on myself, the treatment, they were nuns and priests, trying to look after kids.
Yeah.
And, so the treatment was, in some instances, was good.
Yeah.
And, a lot of instances it was pretty harsh.
Was there abuse?
There was abuse.
There was?
Oh, yeah, there was abuse.
Sexual abuse?
There was sexual abuse that's coming out now.
Is that right?
It's not something that I knew about as a child here in the building. But, with all the probing that's been going on now, and people coming forward with their stories. And, you kind of, I think as I got to be a teenager, kind of knew that something wasn't quite right, but didn't really know what it was. But
so you were in there it was 9 years, right?
I was there for 9 years.
So you were there from the age of 6 to the age of 15?
That's right, yes.
I mean, those are formative years.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really where it had the most impact on our people, is because they are formative years. You know, those are the years that you come into yourself, you know who you are. And then not having that opportunity to know who you are, really, to be told who you are, and all of it being very negative, that's really what happened to just generation after generation of Aboriginal people. Is
that what it was like? Were you told? Were you made to believe that your culture was the wrong
culture?
Oh
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just in that whole business of being punished for speaking our language. And I was very fortunate, because when I would go home in the summertime, I'd spend time with my grandmother, who couldn't speak English, so I was able to maintain my language. So coming back into the building, and you know, just as I got older, becoming more just wanting to prove that I can still speak my language, speaking it and being punished for it, but just wanting to do it. But
the fact that you can speak your language now, you're still an exception, are you not?
Oh yes, yeah. There aren't that many. Well, there aren't that many of us of my generation. You know, because a lot of the fellow students that I went to school with died very young, because when they came out of the residential school, just had a really, really rough life. And so many of them, and we have children now, we have young parents now trying to bring their children up with no grandparents, because a lot of my generation are gone. And then those of us that are left, very few are fluent.
The other side of this too, the other part of the devastation took place back with the parents and the adults, right, whose children had been taken away.
That's right.
I mean, there was awful things that went on there.
Yes, but their parents or their children are taken away, so their role as parents is lost. Is lost both to the parent and to the child. So you break up that role of parent and child, that family role, for 3 or 4 generations. It's pretty hard to rebuild it.
Yeah. You came of age during the 60s, like I did.
Yes.
I know that you had written once about when you were in the residential school, one of the things that you did was you would lead little raids on the kitchen and steal bread and give it out to people, things like that. And I couldn't help but thinking, was this the beginnings of activism for you? What were you like in the 60s? Were you an activist? I mean, that was when Indian activism was coming to the surface.
It was just starting to bubble up. And no, I didn't get involved till about the mid-70s. Yeah, I think that there was a lot of it that was starting to bubble up. But I was a young mum, I had a couple of small children to raise, so I didn't get involved in the 60s. But I started working for the band in the early 70s, and by 1975, that was the big year here in BC. We talk about that was the year of the rejection of funds and Union of BC Chiefs, and we had just demonstrations left, right, and centre, and we were shutting down Indian Affairs and doing all. So I was involved in all that. You were in the thick
of that.
But that was in the 70s.
Okay. You went to school.
Yeah.
You did business, right?
Yes.
Now I wanted to ask you how that came about, because after your experience, I mean, you just talked a minute ago about how people of your generation, that there were a lot of them who couldn't function once they got out, but you could. Would that be attributable possibly to the fact that you weren't in there 12 months a year for 9 years? That you actually got to get out for a couple of months?
Oh, I think so, for sure.
Yeah?
But I mean, everybody got to go home for those 2 months.
Oh, they
did?
Okay.
There were no children that were here the whole time.
Okay.
Because they used to just shut the school down for the July and August.
I see.
But yeah, it definitely made a difference to be able to go home. Like I said, I maintained that connection with my grandmother.
Yeah.
So I maintained the language. But there was that, and there were a number of sort of experiences that I had that I guess I attribute to being able to have lived through that and still being able to go on in life and have a family and be chief for my community for so long.
1970, they shut this place down.
Yes.
And there was a deal through the Oblate Fathers who ran it and the federal government to turn it over to 5 bands, right?
Yes.
You have said that it sounded like a good idea at the time.
Oh, yes.
But it turned out not to be such a good idea.
No.
Why not?
No, if you can imagine, well, in the 70s when they shut it down, it had been a going concern. So then they turned it over to us. Well, it took very, very little time for us to realize that what we really had, what I describe as a big white elephant, because we couldn't afford to keep it up. I mean, what are we going to do? First of all, what are we going to do with the building? We had all kinds of ideas coming forward. You know, other people were thinking we should keep running it as a school. Medical facility, there was, you know, talk about having it like a convalescent home of some type. And then there was when the NDP got in for that short time in the 70s, we had entered into an agreement with them that we would turn it into like a home for people with mental difficulties.
Yes.
And so they were starting to build like little rooms in those classrooms there. And then the whole thing just went sideways.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
It sat empty for what, 20 years?
20 years. Yeah. 20 years. And it was just like like a boil that just doesn't go away, you know, it just keeps erupting, and it was just awful. It just, you could see it going slowly, just getting more and more deteriorated. And I mean, I guess eventually we would have had to knock it down somehow. I don't know how, but that's when we started talking with everyone. You know, what are we going to do with it? I mean, we've got this. It's ours. We need to do something with it.
So this is where you have to tell me about Mary Paul, because this is what changed everything.
Yes.
What happened?
Yes. Well, we were at a meeting over at the band hall across the road there, and we've had various language programs and cultural programs over the years, and they never just seem to gain ground, and we seem to be losing more and more of the language. And so there were a lot of people that were talking about that, and there was a lot of comments being made about how we lost everything here at the residential school. And finally, Mary Paul just said, you know, in a very quiet way, and she said it in Kootenays. She just told us, she said, you know, if you think you lost so much over there, go back in there and get it. She said, you only lose something if you refuse to pick it up again. You know, when you know it's there, and if you refuse to pick it up again. So she was telling us that we needed to take this back. You know, that we couldn't just continue to be victims of this place. We needed to take it back. Well, it took us a long time to figure out what she meant, you know, because I mean, she said this in the 70s, like it was probably a good 10, 15 years before we even started looking at what we could do with the building. Yeah, we started with the first business plan wasn't until the 90s.
Yeah. But there were people who just wanted to see it torn down.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Just gone.
Absolutely. And even as we were building the business plan, we did 2 years of our own internal marketing. And we had to do that because we had to be able to answer the questions of the people who wanted to tear it down, you know, about why we would want to keep it. And I think that it was a very smart move on the part of our nation to bring the younger generation in. Like, not to have people of my generation try to convince others of my generation that we should be turning this into a business that it is today. But we talked with the young people, and we had a couple of young people then that learned about, you know, why this would be a good idea to turn it into a hotel. And then they're the ones that went out and they did all the meetings in the community.
Yeah. And then you had to do that, right? I mean, it was really consensus building. You needed you needed everybody on side.
We had to have everybody on side because this property belongs to 5 Indian bands. Under the Indian Act, each of those bands would have had to agree to this. If one Indian band said, no, we don't want to do it, and even if the other 4 was 100% wanting to do it, we wouldn't have been able to move ahead. So we had to have that. So we spent the 2 years with what I call internal marketing, with that whole consensus building, and then we took it out to a referenda, to the 5 referenda, and each one, there was one that was like, I don't know, I think it was 86% in favor, and then all the way down to, I think the lowest was 68%. Yeah.
So you got what you wanted.
We got what we were working for. Yes.
During the process then of the transformation, I gather that you did a number of cleansing ceremonies.
We did. We did.
Explain that, why that was being done.
Well, we had to. I mean, we knew because there's so much. You could just feel the energy that was in the building for a long time, and it was getting worse. So as we started to do the non-structural demolition in particular, and it was our own people that were doing that because we, like I said, we're 5 Indian bands. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, and we built a $40 million resort. So we had to be very, very inventive in how we brought the money in. So everything that we could get through training programs, work programs, federal government programs, provincial government programs, we got into those. So all the non-structural demolition was done by our people. as training.
Yeah.
You know, there. So we and then all the different stages was the same thing. But it was particularly when we were doing the non-structural demolition, because of course, as you were ripping off, you know, walls or ripping off wall board,
Yeah.
you know, you'd find things behind that children had hidden, and you know, just or you'd find children's names on things, you know, and so it was really hard for our own people that were doing that, because it was either, you know, in some instances it would, as a family member, like it was a brother or you know, their father, you know, that they found.
God,
this.
that would be awful.
So it was really difficult. So we had to do a number of cleansing ceremonies, our own cleansing ceremonies, and then we had people also from Alberta that had come to school here, so we had them come in do cleansing. People from the Okanagan, the same thing.
And you had a Catholic bishop involved in one.
We had the absolutely, yes, we had the bishop come over, and we also had. No, I can't remember if it was Anglican or United. So I mean, we've had so many different ceremonies, different, you know, the different religious groups just coming in to do their own cleansing for, you know, a particular group of students that were here, and they needed that, and so absolutely we, you know, just put the word out, you know, if you need to come and do that, this is probably the best time to do it.
So you end up with a $40 million resort, casino, golf course. And the day, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, the day in 2003, when everybody from the bands got together in the building. Pretty emotional day.
It was.
What was it like?
It was very emotional. It was our First Nation meeting, and it was the first time for many former students to go into the building. They had just stayed away. So, it was, we knew it was going to be difficult, but we also knew that, well, I mean, you have to do it. And so we knew that we had to have supports ready, and we just had to be able to, like Mary Paul said, get in there and pick it up again, you know, there was nobody's going to do it for us. We had to do it ourselves.
Take control of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so during this period of time, prior to that actually, quite a bit prior to that, but while all this was going on, you become chief. Which you did for 30 years. You were chief for 30 years, right?
I was on council for 30 years. I was chief for 26.
Okay. Still close enough as far as I'm concerned. That's an awful long time.
Yeah, it's a long time.
How was that unusual for a woman to become chief in your nation? Is that commonplace?
I replaced a woman chief.
You did?
Angeline
Okay.
Whitehead had been elected before me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about the responsibilities of being chief for that period of time.
Wow.
What are the expectations?
Wow. I mean, it's the whole position just totally evolved over the 30 years, because when I started in as chief, we still had Indian Affairs pretty much running our lives. We still had an Indian agent, for heaven's sakes, right through to now, where, I mean, other than legislated self-government, we don't have the legislation in place, but we're pretty much a self-governing nation here. Yeah, so we went through that whole thing. So a chief's responsibilities, I guess, in a sense, hasn't really changed from the time when my grandfather was chief, because, you know, you're there to serve your people, and when they need something, you help them get what they need. You know, whether it's housing or medical or, you know, whatever, you just help the people. And so sometimes a chief's position is compared to, like, say, a mayor of a city, and I'll say, mayor's got it really easy. Like, there's nothing to. A mayor doesn't get woken up in the middle of the night because you know, there's a fight going on in the house, or somebody's come home drunk or something, and so need to break it up.
So you're dealing with all of that sort of stuff.
You're dealing with everything. Yeah, you deal with everything. Yeah.
And I guess after 26 years of doing that, you pretty much get to know everybody who's in your band and what their proclivities are or
pretty
aren't.
Much. Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is responsibility that I don't think most people could actually handle.
Yeah, and then I don't think that that most people would want to would really want to handle it. But I think too, though, that it's a different kind of environment, you know, in a small Indian reserve, where you you do feel some responsibility for everybody that's in your community. Yeah.
So the casino opens, and it's a very big deal, and it's a big, lavish place. But in that first year, you almost went belly up, didn't you?
Yes.
Now, my understanding is, and I was just told this last evening, in fact, in the resort by someone, that you also got a raw deal from the Gaming Commission in British Columbia. that put you basically behind the 8 ball right from the beginning.
Well, there's really two issues here. Yeah, I mean we didn't get a whole lot of support from the BC government from gaming in order to build out this place. Our casino is a BC Lottery casino, just like all the other ones in the province.
Right.
Now, the only difference, though, is that all the other ones in the province, where they have a host local government agreement, the local municipality has not had to invest and build out the place. We did, but we were given no break for that at all.
Okay.
So we still get the same kind of breakdown that City of Penticton gets, or Richmond, Vancouver, and yet here we are, with no services. There was no running water and they're like all the things that you have in a city when you build
all
a
the
business.
Infrastructure
We had to create all of that. We had to build all of that, and we got absolutely no recognition for doing that. We are treated just exactly the same as if we had plopped this casino in the middle of the city of Cranbrook. It would have been the same deal. So that, I thought, was this is what my friend is talking about when he talks about a raw deal. I think that we did get a raw deal in that way. But I think what's even worse, though, is that here in this province, it's something that I've been fighting for forever, is a share of gaming revenues for Aboriginal people. They do that in every other province in this country except British Columbia.
So where does it go?
Well, it goes to general revenues.
It just goes to general revenues.
Yeah, it goes to general revenues, and they say that that there are benefits that go to the Aboriginal community, but there are not benefits that come to our community that we can use in our community to build up our community.
Right. So in other words, the profits that come out of that casino over there, you don't get them.
No,
they go somewhere else,
and
you just get a chunk of general revenues like everybody else does, basically.
Well, no. We're mixing this up.
Oh,
again.
all right, okay.
So there's a deal for actually running the casino,
right?
And it's the same deal as any other casino in the province, where at the end of the day, when the casino closes its doors, all that money goes to BC Lottery.
Okay.
Once every quarter, a third of it comes back to this property in two ways. A half of that third, or 1/6, goes to the host local government, and the other 1/6 goes to the developer.
Okay.
So in this case, the developer and the First Nation are the host local government. They're the same.
Right.
So we get that 1/3.
Okay.
But that's the same deal that
everybody else has. So it's no different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So how do you saved the place?
We did.
By being quite innovative, by bringing in two other nations.
We did. Yeah, we did.
And not from around here either.
It was tough. Yeah. Well, it was actually it was meant to be. Samson Cree, a lot of their people. They're just over the mountains from us, and they love to golf. And so they'd heard that we had this golf course over here, that's owned by the local tribe.
Yeah.
So they started coming across the mountains to visit the golf course, and just really liked it and liked the idea of what we'd done with the old school. So we started talking to them as a partner first, and it just so happened that Chief Buffalo at the time was speaking with Chief Henry out of Minjickening in Ontario on another deal that they were doing together. And so he says, maybe you'd be interested in this. So she came out and said, yeah, sure, why not? So we ended up with.
So it's a three-way deal now.
It is a three-way deal.
And that saved the place.
That's right.
And I gather it's doing quite well. It's judging
well.
from
Yes.
our experience here. It's doing quite well.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so you stepped down as chief after all of what you just described, all those responsibilities and everything else. And then you take on the job as chief commissioner for the BC Treaties Commission.
Yes.
Like you needed another challenge. What made you want to do that?
Well, I needed to get away. I needed to just step away from being in leadership position here in my nation. I mean, I'd done that for so long.
Yeah.
And I just felt that I did want a different challenge. I wasn't quite ready to retire and just put my feet up.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep working, and then I was offered the job of chief commissioner. So after I thought about it for a while, I thought, why not?
What I thought was interesting was that not long into the job, you appealed directly to Stephen Harper, and you said something that it was for me. It was like one of those "the emperor has no clothes" moments, where you basically said, "Listen, this has been going on for 16 years. It's like the people involved now forgot what they were here for."
exactly.
And I know that over the years I had done interviews with people about the treaty process and what was going on, and it would make your head hurt because nothing seemed to be getting accomplished.
Exactly. Yes.
Do you feel that way? Do you think that anything's moving now? Do you feel
I think that there's definitely more of an awareness that the treaty process is stuck in a bit of a rut here, and that we all need to get together to move it out of that rut. You know, we're going into our 20th anniversary next September, and what I'm really recommending to the principals and kind of pushing them a little bit on this is that they make a recommitment to this, and that it comes from the highest level. It has to come from the Prime Minister and the Premier and the First Nations leadership. It has to come from that level, because that's the only way that it's going to wake up the system that is there, that's been holding it up.
What do you think the fact that there is now a Conservative majority federal government means to this process?
I think that it means that they have the ability to do something about it if they really want to do something about it. But my biggest challenge to the federal government is to say, you've got, just in the Aboriginal community itself, never mind what the feds and the province have spent on this process, but just within the Aboriginal community, there's a $500 million investment. Isn't it time we started seeing a return on that investment? Or do we just keep pumping more and more money to, like, sort of into this big hole?
Are they listening to you, do you think?
Well, I think that they're starting to.
Yeah?
I think that it's
you
hard.
Make enough noise?
It's hard, it's hard not to listen to. You keep saying it often enough.
I bet. Okay, our last couple of minutes, I want to bring you back to this place, because along the walls inside the main building, and I was told, by the way, yesterday too, and I'm sure you know about this as well, there are people who come here, Aboriginal people who come here to golf or to use the casino or whatever, who will not stay in the main building, who will just stay in the lodge part of it, still won't go in there. But along the walls in the main building are all these wonderful old photographs. And one of them is of your grandfather.
Yes.
And there's one in there of you and some other girls.
Yes.
When was that? It
was our first communion. 7 years old, and we're all in our little white dresses, and that was our first communion.
And you're all smiling.
Oh yeah. Oh, we just had our first communion. It was a big deal.
It was a big deal.
It was the day that you were special.
Yeah. So when you go into that building these days and walk past a picture like that, how do you feel?
It brings back memories, but I feel good.
Yeah.
I always feel good when I go into our hotel.
So those spirits, for want of a better word, have been exorcised. Those bad ones. Yes,
they have. Yeah, and every now and again I fall back into the sort of some of the old words that I like. I'll talk about the old school, and my grandchildren, they don't know. They just. School? What school? Oh, you mean Grandma's Hotel?
That's a good thing that they know it as a hotel and not as a school?
Oh yeah, it's a good thing. It's what they say, that you have to change the memories in your children's minds, and to give them good memories instead of all the bad ones that we had.
Well, congratulations on it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, Sophie. Thank you very much. It was a very nice meeting. Thanks.
You too.